The reason why I believe a lot of product marketing teams are in silos is because of a lack of understanding of what product marketers actually do. It became more popular over time, but a lot of marketing leaders and a lot of these companies have actually never worked with product marketing or
Mm,
have product marketing background, right? A lot of marketing leaders came from demand gen, and because of that, they don't understand what product marketing can bring to the table, and then they just think, okay, well, this is a role that is to just support me, and
mhm.
therefore more and more it became this support function and less of a strategic glue that actually holds the different teams together.
Today with me, I have Yi Lin Pie, who's a product marketing coach for organizations and product marketing, product teams, helping them, among others, break the communication silos, become more revenue and data driven. And today we're going to talk about specifically that. Yi Lin has recently wrote a fairly popular post about how PMMs can build this multi-channel product marketing growth engine that is strategic, that pulls at specific growth levers, and like combines the different growth levers and unites the different functions in the effort to demonstrate more growth for product marketing activities. Elin, would you like to introduce yourself, say a few words about your career and your experience so far?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here, Emilia. Really excited to be here. So, as Emilia mentioned, I am a product marketing coach and advisor. I work with individuals as well as teams and companies to build really strong product marketing expertise and also deliver world class organizations. That sounds a little bit too corporate, but really, to what you were trying to say is ultimately, I want to really raise the profile of product marketers and making sure they're aligned with revenue. They're actually delivering the results that they're meant to deliver for different organizations and then become really strong growth drivers. And that's sort of why I'm really excited to talk about having this conversation and share with you some of the insights I've gathered along the way.
What you mentioned, becoming more revenue driven and more tied to revenue as a product marketer, super important, especially in like the times of another potentially looming recessions. There are the murmurs of this. And we had a little chat at the backstage before the webinar started that, oftentimes the product marketers that can't demonstrate the impact of their work on revenue are the first ones, to unfortunately the companies decide to part ways with because they can't like demonstrate the impact on the bottom line. So,
Mhm.
and you did mention something along the lines that was like the overarching theme of your article that most of the PMs you talk to feel that they work in silos. They are supposed to work with sales. They are supposed to work with product, but they are not, like an integral part of either of the teams, and trying to combine the functions super difficult, trying to then make a measurable impact on the revenue for them, even
Mhm.
more difficult. How
Yeah.
can PMMs break down these internal silos to drive these measurable business outcomes?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'll answer it in two parts. The first is actually what causes the silo, right? Because when product marketing become a really growing function, originally it came from the back in the days of the CPG kind of companies, right? It came from brand management, which was a very sort of strategic role, like mini CEOs of product and marketing for each product. And that sort of evolved into the product marketing function. The reason why I believe a lot of product marketing teams are in silos is because of a lack of understanding of what product marketers actually do. It became more popular over time, but a lot of marketing leaders and a lot of these other companies have actually never worked with product marketing or
Mm,
they have product marketing background, right? A lot of marketing leaders came from demand gen, and a lot of product leaders has never worked with product marketing. It was just product with sales or something, right? And because of that, they don't understand what product marketing can bring to the table, and then they just think, okay, well, this is a role that is to just support me, and
mm-hmm.
therefore more and more it became this support function and less of a strategic glue that actually holds the different teams together. So
100%. Mm.
yeah. So then going into then how do you break down the silos and how do you make product marketing be seen as a strategic lever, I think it really comes down to three things. Number one, actually mastering and demonstrating the skill set of a product marketer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So understanding how do you do what is positioning and messaging, not only how do you create the best positioning messaging that's captured on the canvas, but then how do you translate that across different channels that actually matters to other stakeholders. So for instance, I have worked and coached 200 plus product marketers, and they're always asking me, do you have a template for positioning and messaging? I'm like, I sure do, but maybe that's not the right question to ask, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happens after this template? Right? You have to then translate that to each channel, talk to your demand gen marketer. How is this then going to show up in ad copies? How is this going to show up in search results, right? All of those things has to be consistent. And then therefore paying attention to what your partners actually need and giving them what they want to enable them. Then they would actually tie whatever results they've generated back to the work that you're doing. So mastery of skills, and then also ensure you're communicating and delivering that. And then the second thing I will say is to leverage AI. I know that was obviously
Mm-hmm.
everything every day is everybody talking about AI, right? I will say product marketers are have definitely been leveraging AI. I know you've seen news from Shopify CEOs saying all the employees must use AI, right? So I have clients who work at Shopify who are product marketers where they're actually building their own AI agents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bots to help them with their workflow. And I think all of that is great and it's amazing, but it's really important to understand how and when to use AI, because it's not a replacement for your work. It is to enhance your work. So instead of thinking what AI tool should I use, the right question to be asking yourself is what is the job to be done, right? What do I need to do? And then how is AI going to help me? And then what are the parts AI cannot do, but I have to get human help and enhance my skill over there, right? I
Mm.
think that is really, really key, because then what happens is every single messaging for every B2B SaaS company looks the same because everybody uses AI, right? Here's a ChatGPT generated AI thing that says the same thing. There will be no originality left. So it's been very smart and strategic because product marketing is an art and a science. And then the last part I would say is also focusing on influence and emotional intelligence, because that is the part that is not replaceable by AI at all, right? Like you have to
Mm-hmm.
drive to break down silos, you have to build actual relationships by having real conversations, understanding the needs of different stakeholders, communicating up, down, and around within the company, which is 50% of the job of a product marketer. I probably can discuss this for 3 hours, but I will just stop now.
Yeah, no, like a lot of very interesting insights that I would like to pick up on specifically. For instance, what you mentioned in terms of establishing the relationship and also establishing probably the boundaries between sales and product, who tend to, in my experience, treat product marketers, as you said, not as a strategic function that like unites these two departments, but as a
Mhm.
sort of subsidiary assistant that like can execute on the one hand sales enablement, on the other hand on some dirty work surrounding product launches that the product managers don't want to do. And this often happens that because product marketing is not viewed as a standalone function, right? It's part of
Mhm.
marketing, that it's still seen by these two departments as subservient to their needs, and they're maybe opposing viewpoints, but not as someone
Mhm.
that can execute on their own strategy. And of course, product marketing, like they should like think about the positioning of the new features, new functionalities that the product team is shipping, and then also
Mhm.
how the sales takes this positioning and basically drives more new business or expansion revenue with
Mhm.
that, rather
Yeah.
than just executing on the wish list. Oh, I need a battle card. Oh, I need a landing page, right, etc., etc. How
Mhm.
do you position, and that is quite interesting, how do you position the role of a product marketer in an organization so they are seen as a strategic partner rather than this kind of facilitator or assistant?
Such a great question. So I actually posted about this yesterday, so I feel like it's
Mm-hmm.
very timely. Um, the first thing I would do is try to understand the business motion, right, for the company. So primarily what I mean by that is it really a sales led company or is it a product led company? Um, in the sell, and then once you figure that out, right, and then you understand who are the key stakeholders, that is the most important party to driving revenue and the bottom line, and then what you can do to help them break down silos and truly be a partner to enable them. So in a sales organization, salespeople are the ones trying to get customers, right? And of course, that's really, really important. But sales historically has also some challenges working with product directly. So in this
Mhm.
way, the product marketer's job is to come in and break down the silo between sales and product. And so when you position yourself in this sense, you're becoming the glue for the two teams. So
Mhm.
then I would message if I'm in a sales organization, I will be like, my goal is to help you truly understand the product and deliver and know how to articulate the value of the product so you can sell it to the customers in the best way possible and get, much higher win rates, right, in the short period of
Mhm.
time. And then I would say to the to the product counterparties, I'm going to then gather sales intelligence and share it back with you to
Mhm.
inform the product
Exactly.
roadmap, right? So you're the
Mhm.
conduit there. But if you're in the product organization, there's no sales really, right? It's
Yeah.
mostly product led. Then you have to understand, okay, well, if that's product led, what is my role as a product marketer? If let's say it's a freemium model, then my goal is to help on the acquisition side to ensure there's as little friction as possible, right? For people to discover and try out your product. And then once they're in the product, I'm going to do everything I can to make them adopt the product and the features as much as possible so that they can reach their aha moment sooner. So then your goal is different, right? As a product marketer, mostly you're trying to understand the user journey, right? Their patterns. You are going to create messaging across different parts of that process so that they interact and click with the product inside. So what I'm trying to say, I think the overall strategy essentially is instead of telling people, here's me, I'm product marketing and I can do those great things for you, try to instead think from their perspective and then position yourself as the solution to their problems and how you're going
Mhm.
to enable their success. When you contextualize product marketing that way, you're going to have way more buy-in from the leaders in the organization and your stakeholders.
Gotcha, gotcha, totally. Because the product and sales teams often speak completely different language,
Hmm.
right? And they don't really understand each other. And I see the product marketer as the bilingual person that can be an interpreter between these functions. And as you said, on the one hand side, pass on the insights from the prospect facing team, the sales team, back to the
Hmm.
product,
Hmm.
that can allow them facilitate the discovery process and prioritize different features. On the other hand, of course, translate the technical language that I remember when I was working as a product marketer. And for the
Hmm.
longest time, I was serving in that role at User Pilot before we hired our first product marketers, as a standalone role for this organization. And then I would get a brief from the head of product that was so technical, I had to read it like 2, 3 times to understand
What
what is the
exactly?
value of these new features really, but
Right.
really, and
Hmm.
then translate it into prospect facing collateral that the sales team could actually use to talk to the prospects. So yeah, totally positioning yourself as the kind of facilitator makes total sense. But
Hmm.
again, like we were talking about product people wanting to make a mark on revenue, especially.
Hmm.
And you wrote something in your article that really stuck with me.
Hmm.
PMMs who understand growth don't just execute individual tactics. They build a multi-channel growth engine that integrates acquisition, retention, and monetization strategies across multiple teams and channels to drive sustainable business impact. How can PMMs do that? Especially build these multi-channel growth engines by combining, acquisition, retention, and monetization. You wrote also that it's difficult to do everything at once, especially if you're a single
Hmm.
PMM. How do you prioritize, but at the same time combine these to create this multi-channel strategy?
Wow, that's a really great question. There's like there's multi parts to answer, right? I would say the first step sort of removing yourself from the tactics, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
obviously the cheat sheet is not the cheat sheet is not meant to be used as here's a random check tactic, just pull out from this cheat sheet and use that, right? The first thing is to actually understand business levers. So, like any great growth person, you start with understanding acquisition, monetization, and retention. And I really believe product marketers should think that way as well, is to really understand where are the biggest gaps and opportunities along these three levers. So, if you're thinking acquisition, right, it's obviously very broad. And then you have to really pinpoint which part of the acquisition funnel your company really needs help. And then once you figure that out and determine the key lever that's going to move the needle, the next thing is to figure out, well, how do I then overcome the challenge? What would be some strategies from product marketing perspective that's going to really help with improving performance, right? At that particular part of the lever. So I didn't include it in the article its body, but I did link to a product marketing strategy framework that I have that people can run through their mind to figure out
Mm-hmm.
what are some of those strategies. And then once you have done that, the next step is then see, okay, well, what are the tactics, right? I can use, which is where the cheat sheet really comes in. And this is really important because the tactics is not to say, I'm as a product marketer, I will own everything, right? Here. Actually, that's the opposite. It's to figure out what are the tactics and who might be the owner of that, and then go and collaborate with them on that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because then when you're aligned with them on those kind of initiatives, that's when you're going to be seen and actually then directly attached, right, to revenue, basically. So then you basically repeat this process for different parts of the lever. And that's kind of how you develop your own marketing plan, because then you can tie tactics to product marketing strategy to the three growth levers over time. That's sort of answers to your first question, or first part of your question. And I think the other part you asked was really about when your team is too small, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's also a really important one, because contrary to what maybe the cheat sheet is trying to say, I actually really believe in using as fewer channels as possible when you are trying to
Mm.
um, drive maximum impact. Because, as you probably know, it's really about it's the 80/20 rule. Like, the most and vast majority of the results will likely come from the top one or two channels. So for me, it's really important to understand what are the hero channels when it comes to each initiative and campaign. How do we maximize and optimize that one particular channel effectively? And then how can we intentionally pick out one or two other channels to further enhance that and amplify it, and maybe test, right? Because we don't know maybe how it's going to perform over time. So I think having that sort of framework and cheat sheet is helpful for you to select what channels might be the most important, and
Mm-hmm.
also say no to certain channels given resource constraints.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Like you can't, do everything with a small team. I remember initially we faced this challenge at User Pilot where,
Mhm,
like we were kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks at the beginning
mhm,
because we weren't like convinced that one channel would work in particular. So with
mhm,
a very small team, we were spreading ourselves very thinly. And then at some point we hired like a fractional VP of marketing who consulted us and kind of told us the obvious. Why don't you guys focus on what was already working? Yeah.
mhm.
So in one
Exactly.
of your frameworks, you actually talked about like how PMMs can identify which of the channels to prioritize for maximizing the impact on their activities and growth. Can you maybe, for the audience that haven't read your article and haven't seen the framework yet, as I said, again, I included the article here in the comments. Please also follow Yi Lin on LinkedIn. She's sharing very interesting thoughts and frameworks as well, templates on her LinkedIn regularly too. How do you analyze, use data, use tools to like determine which channel to focus on first?
Great question. I think historic data, if you have them, is really the best starting point for using it. I'll give you an example about what happened in one of the launches we did when I was leading a product marketing team at Teachable. Teachable was like a product led growth
Mm-hmm.
company, right? And previously, when we did launches, before when I was there, when we're launching like a new product feature, a product function, there was like a standard checklist, right? Like you've seen those probably. There's always some checklist floating around to say we have to write a blog to introduce this. We're going to write a message, an in-app message about this, and then we're going to write some emails. So my team was, didn't have a lot of capacity. We were a very small team, and we had to drive a huge amount of engagement and adoption for this one particular feature. And so I had my team come up with a different plan to say, how can we use as little resources as possible to drive the highest adoption for this? And we looked at the data and the information and found out more than 50% of all the adoptions in previous iterations of these launches came from in-app notifications and guidance. But we're like, okay, well, what if we just double down on this one channel and really optimize that instead of focusing our efforts across 5 channels, trying to write many different emails or having to write blogs and things like that. So then I had my product marketer on the project work with our UX designer
Mm.
on the product side, and they plotted out the entire user journey of what
Mm-hmm.
a user would experience if they were to discover and use this product inside the app. And then we created a very customized guided tour with very specific messaging the product marketer developed that led them to different points, right, where they would actually use sign up and activate this particular feature and actually use it. By focusing pretty much all of our efforts on that particular activity, we actually 2x our adoption goals compared to
Mm,
before.
wow.
And that became one of the most successful launches we did in the history of our team and the company. And and then that really helped set a playbook moving forward, right? Is really paying attention to detailed per channel and then investing resources there instead of spreading ourselves super thin.
So would you say, for instance, that a path analysis could help with understanding that user journey by different channels in here as like a specific tool to look into that? Say if you don't have the internal resources to plot, the touch points out for you.
Oh, sorry. Do you mind rephrasing the question?
Oh, yeah, yeah, sure. So in terms of like a specific solution, like you said that you looked in the UX designer, right, to map out the
Mhm.
touch points on the user journey from different channels so that the product marketer then could address it with specific, engagement experiences. If I
Mhm.
got it right, yeah. Would you say the path analysis is one of the tools that can help product marketers with actually understanding what they can do, where are the biggest low hanging fruits?
Absolutely. We did use a tool, a data analytics tool, to do
Mm-hmm.
this, along with the expertise of the product UX designer. And I think more and more product marketers should use those tools and get into the product and understand analytics. There are so many areas where people are just not really looking at and
Mm-hmm.
patterns you're yet to find. And moving some of those metrics can be really easy and quick wins because very few people are actually looking at those data.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I feel very few people are looking at those data because they are not accessible. And again, speaking of silos,
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
may, sit with, sometimes they may sit somewhere in the data warehouse and, some larger, more traditional companies have data scientists that then use Power BI and whatnot to pull the data out and then process it on request, as opposed to having the data ready and accessible by different teams at their fingertips. This was like shameless plug, something that we are really
Mhm.
aiming for at User Pilot, and it has already always been our vision to simplify product analytics and make them actionable, not only for the product team but also for product marketing teams, customer success teams, even marketing teams, to really understand these user journeys and then to be able to act on them. So what we are catering to here is, for instance, like path analysis. So
Mhm.
speaking of looking at users signups from different channels, as long as you pass on, the source of your sign up to your CRM,
Mhm.
And we pull that data from your CRM, from HubSpot, Salesforce, and then we can plot the different user journeys depending on the channel, depending on the organization. And the product
Mhm.
marketing managers using, User Pilot for this can instantly react on the data, on the drop-offs, for instance, by building an in-app experience that would like explain maybe the friction points or
Yeah.
like guide people to the desired outcome based on their jobs to be done. So, that like definitely resonates with me because again, I've been using User Pilot for a very long time. I actually was a user before I joined
Oh, I
the
love it.
company. So that's the story. I was working for a social media scheduling app where we were using User Pilot, and a lot of times we like to assume that the UX should be better and that these things should be self-explanatory, and we shouldn't have to
Mhm.
provide user guidance. But in my experience, that's kind of a pipe dream, and especially with complex products, there will always be some bottlenecks that need to be like kind of provided guidance for. Um, I'm curious what you mentioned the tools, but like what metrics do you, for instance, use to like identify these growth challenges? Again, you mentioned in your articles, PMS who grasp growth mechanics can better align their strategies with company objectives, collaborate cross-functionally, and ultimately become more valuable leaders. Any specific, metrics that at Teachable, for instance, you were looking at regularly to determine where are the potential growth levers?
So the type of metrics we look at Teachable specifically were really adoption focused, which were related to
Mm-hmm.
like the launches that we were doing. So adoption is a huge one, and then the other ones are activation metrics and also churn metrics. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so daily active users, right, monthly active users, and all of those things are really important as well. A lot of the other metrics, a lot of the other organizations I've worked at are really B2B focused. So I would say they're less in product metrics specifically, but there are much more funnel metrics that are more, business oriented, like pipeline metrics and conversion rates, close one rates, and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And have you seen like any of those correlate particularly with, um, higher win rates, higher retention rates?
Sorry, which correlates with the win rates
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry. Which of the metrics did you see like are particularly correlated, um, with the business outcomes that you mentioned?
well, all of them. Yeah,
Yeah.
I will say right now from the clients that I work with, especially on the B2B side, win rate is really, really important because it's extremely competitive in the market.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you have a solution, um, that is in established category as an example, it's very likely the customers are extremely familiar with your category or they're already using a different tool. So the win rate against competitor, especially, right, becomes really, really important. So a lot of the work I'm doing currently, for instance, is helping um, create strategies as well as tactics to help product marketers really increase the win rate. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to, let's say, launch a particular feature, how would you do it in a way that is going to make a customer choose you versus
Mm.
somebody else? So the messaging has to be extremely competitive. It can't just be, I'm just talking about myself and how great it is. But I'm like, okay, that's great, but it's the same features your competitor also have. Well, now how are you going to talk about it in that way,
Mm-hmm.
right? To make yourself highly differentiated. So this is kind of like the point I was trying to make earlier, which is going back then to figure out what are the highest priorities for a company, which lever does it affect, and then picking the right metric to then determine what is the right strategy for doing so.
I totally hear you. Yeah, yeah. And it's all sort of creates this flywheel effect, right? Where you constantly need to reevaluate basically the situation for your company and which growth levers and channels are the most impactful for the stage of growth.
Hmm.
Because like I've been with the company for many years, so I've experienced like how different channels had a different impact at the beginning. Again, when we were talking on the backstage, you said that some companies that are not product led, for them certain metrics don't matter at all. So one needs to, there's no like one single template that would obviously apply um, to the different organizations. So one needs to adapt the frameworks and the playbooks and identify the right growth channels. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And I think ultimately there is a framework. The framework is to think back to the goals, right? And the
Yeah.
growth levers. That's the framework. And then once that happens, then you have to adopt the specific strategy and tactics to then align with your company.
100%. Yeah, so we talked a little bit already about balancing the different channels,
Mhm.
right? Email, in-app messaging, live sessions in this multi-channel strategy, right? When the team is small in particular, how do you discriminate, like which channels should go first, so to say, without hurting, the business outcomes again? Is there a sort of a blueprint for this, for making that decision?
Not a, I mean, I think the most obvious answer, like we discussed, is really looking at benchmark data,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just like what has historically worked, what has already been performing well. Let's optimize that and make sure it continues to perform well and even better. And then you can then look at going back to your prospect and your customers and then see, okay, where would they where are they right, what other channels are they consuming, and then make some strong hypothesis to then pick one or two channels to test
Mm-hmm.
based on your hypothesis on where they would want to consume information and perhaps likely to convert. And of course look at best practices across the industry on your comparable companies in your sector to figure out and get inspired right by the different activity they're doing and see if there's anything you're willing to try. Yeah, I guess I would be curious because you are leading marketing here. Like, what's your process like?
Yeah, same. Looking at data, looking at first touch attribution, where are currently most of our qualified deals coming from, like on the sales side.
Yeah.
Also, like if you have a good cross domain, cross channel attribution tracking for
Mhm.
trials, which we haven't prioritized at this point. Then looking also at the first touch conversions to trials, and then thinking, yeah, like how can you improve this particular channel at
Mhm.
the potentially expense of the ones that are the weakest. So again, there's no point in throwing spaghetti at the wall when you already know what sticks.
Right.
Um, and this can be very different for different sizes of organizations. We over indexed heavily on SEO in the early days. We were
Mhm.
producing tons and tons of very informative product led content. And that is still paying dividends.
Right.
They're still driving the majority of our
Mhm.
leads and then our deals. So obviously that's something we need to tend to in particular at the expense of
Mhm.
maybe email marketing, right? Or even knowing that our biggest paying customers still come through the sales process. A lot of them don't even really care about the trial. They're like, show me, I want to be hands off, you show me how to do it, and it would be best if you even set it up all for me, and it would be even better if you do it for me, right?
Right.
So
Mhm.
that's why we made the conscious decision not to put so much stress on the product led self serve aspect,
Mhm.
right, as opposed to refining the sales process, for instance. It's quite ironic because we are mostly associated with being a tool for improving product led self serve experience. But in fact, like since the most mature organizations that can use our tool most effectively are pretty large, they typically don't want to check out for the self-serve motion. They want to still talk to someone, and
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
so there is that. Awesome. This was a super, super insightful conversation. Elin, I know there were so many questions that I could have asked you in relation to, your article and the framework. Was there anything that you would like to add that maybe I didn't ask about?
No, I mean, I think that's you asked really great questions. So Appreciate it. Ultimately, I think, just to summarize and reiterate, the key message is product marketer generally are not part of the growth conversation.
Mm,
And if you're a product marketer sort of watching this, right, I think the number one thing is just to remember, get close to your growth teams to really understand how do they think and come up with
mm,
strategies and ideas. And then the more you are thinking and behaving that way, the more likely you're going to create opportunities that's going to be truly aligned with driving
mhm.
growth. And then that will also give you job security and visibility in wherever you are in your career.
100%. Yeah, I've had that conversation with like the product marketers that have been joining our organization, that the more they can demonstrate their impact, rather than being just seeing themselves as assistants, and the more they can drive the strategy, the better.
Mhm.
Um, awesome. Our participants may have some questions to you. I'm curious, do you guys have any? Please plop them into the chat. If not, then I'm also going to share Yi Lin's LinkedIn here in the chat. So if you guys want to connect with her and ask her any questions in private, reach out to her, and she will be more than happy to help. Again, Yi Lin provides consulting services in product marketing for, like growth organizations. We at User Pilot provide the tools for product marketing teams at growth organizations, also product teams that facilitate that kind of cross-functional, multi-channel communication strategy within your products, from understanding the data and understanding the metrics through product analytics to acting on that data for in-app engagement, and finally collecting user sentiment with in-app feedback. It seems we don't have any questions, so thank you so much, Yi Lin. That interview will be still available for replay, so if someone couldn't join or would like to refer back to certain sections, it will be available on our website and on YouTube.
Thank you so much for having me.
Likewise,
Bye.
bye. Have a good rest of your day.
You
Cheers.
too.
Thank you, everyone.